Welcome to the Speaking Podcast. You can find all our episodes on speakingpodcast.com. We're also on BitChute and YouTube. You'll find the links in the podcast description. I'm also a podcasting coach because I've got 5 podcasts: the Awakening Podcast, Exposing Fraud and Corruption, but with solutions; Meditation Podcast to help you chill; Learn Polish Podcast does exactly what it says on the tin; and the Crypto Podcast to learn everything about crypto. Find everything on bio.link/podcaster. Today, really looking forward to this because not only is she an international speaker, she got, I believe, 5 CDs, an author, dancer, musician, and lots more besides. Please welcome Naomi Susan Isaacs.
Thank you for that amazing introduction, Roy. I think you'll have to chop the dancing out of that. I don't do that.
Well, I've seen you with John Travolta, and I'm sure you probably danced with him, or maybe you wanted to dance with him.
Yeah, that was a real fun interview. That was really, really amazing. I got to be in part of a large event in Los Angeles and had the opportunity to pose a question to him. And I was delighted to find out how warm-hearted, natural, and normal he was. And yeah, that interview is up on YouTube if anybody wants to watch it. It's one of the highlights of my life.
Just the picture, I didn't see the interview, but I will check it out. But just the picture is so beautiful. Just the way he's looking at you, the way you're looking at him, it's fantastic. So I suppose, I mean, I've mentioned a few of the things, but you might let the listeners know who's Naomi.
Thank you very much, Roy. I've had the delight, the privilege, and whatever else you like to call it, to have many professions in my life. One of these people that doesn't take everything in a straight line, try different things out. And for a while, I thought that was terrible. You know, you hear how you have to stick to something, have a goal and go for it. And I realized now, as I'm older, that when I'm coaching, all these different professions that I've had have given me so much insight into what lives other people are living, which is one of the things you need as a coach more than anything. So I started off as a school teacher. I loved teaching and I loved the kids, but I hated school. I hated the system. That was in England where I grew up. Then I met a very charming young man who brought me to Germany. And let's say 50 years later, we're still good friends. But during this time in Germany, I had to find a job. So what did I do? 2-finger typist at a large corporation in the English department, because my German was non-existent to start with. And over the next 17, 18 years, I changed companies many times. So I was a receptionist and order processing clerk, I think is what they call it in English. And I said receptionist, the secretary. And then I left that to go back to my original dream of becoming a jazz singer. And I actually made it. I was quite surprised, but the music world actually tolerated me. I was in my mid-40s by then. And during my time on the stage, people used to come up and say, do you also teach? And initially I was terrified. I thought, I'm just a beginner myself. I can't teach. But my singing teacher said, try it out. You'll learn a lot. And I'm so grateful that she did, because it was through that I actually discovered not only my passion, as that's one thing. If I have a passion for doing something, that's very nice for me, but what's in it for everybody else? But it turned out to be my actual talent, which was finding out the potential in other people, sometimes even renaming it so that it's true to themselves, so that it's their authentic talent, their real thing that they're good at. And that's what I've been doing to this day for the last 30-something years, and loving every minute of it. I'm not intending to stop anytime soon.
Excellent. And your father was a musician, and I don't know, was it your mother was it that? Were you actually is that how you got into music at the start, or how did it kind of come about?
It's one of the things we grew up with. It was like, some kids go out on the street and play football and ride their bikes. and we would come home from school and wash our hands and fight to who was, myself and my brother, who's going to play the piano first. It was, we didn't have to be forced into it. It was just one of the things that we did. My mother was a ballet dancer, but she gave it up to look after us and help us grow up. And yeah, that was just how life was. There was nothing particularly special about it. Occasionally there were parties when some well-known people came around. Those were the bits I disliked. I just liked the music. And I liked making music, and discovered at some point that the classical music that I grew up with was wonderful music, but it didn't reflect my personal feeling for life. And then I discovered railroad songs and skiffle, and eventually I discovered jazz, and that's where I felt my musical life came alive. That's what I related to more than anything.
Excellent. And the 5 CDs, are they jazz? Because I saw one of them was something about voice meditations, but is there totally separate from jazz and the rest are all jazz?
No. Again, musically, I tried different things. One of them is songs that I wrote. One of them, the voice meditation, was an idea that I had. If I were to do it again today, I would do it completely differently. It's got some weird sounds in it, which some people even found terrifying. So you're not going to meditate to something that feels terrifying. Scape Lands was free improvisation. I met two young musicians who I absolutely, we just gelled as a group immediately. One of a bass player and a drummer and percussionist. And they're still working in free improvisation today. I did a gig with them about a couple of years back. And this is the no holds barred, no safety net. You don't know what's going to happen. It's all under the motto of whoever starts, whatever happens, and when it's over, it's over. A lot of fun to do, maybe not quite so much fun to listen to always, depending on what you find on that journey. Which one haven't I mentioned? I can't remember. Anyway, those are, they're all different.
Okay, excellent. So I know that you're an international speaker, and you were mentioned on one of my previous podcasts with the now world champion of public speaking for Toastmasters, Cyril Junior Dim. But right. I'd like to know, before we talk about, because obviously you were instrumental in helping him, but your own speaking journey, how it all developed.
That's very interesting. I've been a member of Toastmasters for 18, 17 years, I don't know. My speaking career has been incidental and a lot of the time quite by chance, because at some point during that journey, I noticed, as I said, that teaching was my real passion, and I noticed that the more I set my goal at being successful on stage, the worse I got. And where did I speak on stage? Okay, I traveled to Singapore and gave a talk and then a workshop. The talks were mostly introductions to workshops. The same in Los Angeles, the same further north in California, and in Canada, in Toronto, and in various places. I always noticed that a concert or a speaking gig, afterwards, I never had the sense of pleasure and fulfillment that I got out of teaching. It wasn't even always very stressful. It was simply, I don't want to be lecturing people. I want to have this exchange with them to find out who they are and to see how we can help unfold and discover and excavate their potential. I even won a speaking competition at some point here in Munich, and I found I got no pleasure out of it. So I was surprised, because I thought, being on stage and being up front and being in the limelight, and wow, isn't this great? And it wasn't. Which set me on I don't know what you call it. Yes, I'm just looking at people and thinking, there's all this thing about leadership. You've got to be a leader in your world, and you've got to inspire people. And I thought, it's all right being a leader, but a leader can only lead if he has followers and supporters, because no leader can do everything himself or herself. You've got to have, if it's a company, you've got to have your staff. If it's, I did a play that I wrote, a one-person play, an autobiographical thing. And I played all around Germany. It was in German for about 3 years. But everywhere I went, at least 5 other people had to be there to open up the theater, to put the lights on, to get the sound working, to sell the tickets, to all the stuff that's involved. And I was the one with my name on the program. And, it didn't feel right. It just didn't feel right. And I didn't get that pleasure out of it. I got so much more pleasure out of Cyril winning than I would have had if I'd won myself. Not my thing.
And with the Toastmasters, did you kind of go down the road going for kind of area director and all these things? Yeah, I was the same. I had no interest in that. I thought there was too much politics involved in Toastmasters, and I don't know, is it the same in Germany? But I could see that it depended who you were connected with, who was getting through, and it was a click. And same, I got into the final of 5 countries, and I was like, it wasn't a case of, it was like I didn't want to do it again. Could I do it again, and could I go for something else, and would I be better? Probably, based on my experience. But it was the same thing. It wasn't something that was floating my boat, to be honest with you.
Right. And I think it's what you just said, I think that's incredibly important, that we don't fall for what we think is going to be the glamour of being winners and leaders and leading this life. It's not only incredibly stressful, but of all the people that set off on that journey, how many are really successful, and how many feel that they're failures if they don't manage it? And redefining oneself as an adventurer, a supporter, a person who's there for other people, available to be that person that can help other people if they want that, can be just as satisfying, if not more so. And at this moment in my life, I'm actually focusing. I do have coaches that come. I mean, I worked with Cyril for about 2 years, and the joy of his winning, of course, was also accompanied by a certain amount of publicity for me. So people are calling me up who hadn't yet heard of me before. So that in itself is very rewarding. But I'm focusing at the moment on those people whose names you never hear. The people who work at the supermarket so that you can go shopping. The guy who drives the lorry, the truck with the bread in the morning so that I can buy bread. And I'm always reminded of somebody, my friends have heard me speak of her very often, an icon in my life, somebody who held our family together in times of need, somebody who was always there for us. And that was our cleaning lady. And she wasn't just there for us, she was there for the whole district. It was a small village-style district in London, more or less self-contained. And when she died, you couldn't see her, the front door of her apartment, for flowers. She was so much loved. Her name was Kathleen. And people of my age, girls of my age, girls that back then, there were so many of them who were called Kathleen, at least with their middle name. She was adored by everyone. She was always there when she was needed. If somebody was having a baby too early, she would be there to help the baby into the world and do all the work the doctor should have done, but he wasn't there in time. And I thought, these are the people who really keep the world running. There may be some speakers that really inspire us, yes. And these speakers may also create something which they couldn't have created if they hadn't been speakers. I don't want to belittle the speaker, the career or the profession, but it's only one of millions of professions that are also valuable.
Absolutely. And like, I know my grandmother, when things were tight, she was keeping us together. She was making sure there was food on the table. She was buying the coal, and she was a cleaner. And I never disrespected a cleaner. I would always security guards, cleaners. And I've talked to multimillionaires, even possibly billionaires. I had one that was a mentor. And I'll have the same conversation with them. I don't look up to them. I treat them both with respect, but there's so many people, they'll grovel to the person that has the wealth or the fame, and they'll look down on the waiter or the garbage man. And to me, you treat everybody the same.
Absolutely. You mentioned waiters. This is something which I noticed at Toastmasters, because I enjoy the Toastmasters meetings. I've never wanted to, as you say, climb this ladder of area director and all the rest of it. I love being in the club. I love supporting the other people in the club. And if I'm timer or doing something really menial, it's just as good as anything else. But I notice, at a meeting, you introduce each other on stage, you shake hands, it's all very formal, you do everything right. And then afterwards you go for a beer. And I've noticed that some people don't even look at the waiter when he comes with the beer, let alone say thank you. And I remember on one particular occasion, I was with not my club, I was visiting. We all went for a meal afterwards, and the waitress was there. And I said, "Oh, this looks interesting." And I turned, I said, sort of, "What is it? I've never heard of this before." And she explained it to me. I said, "Oh, thank you. I'd love one of those." "Yes, thanks." And one of the people at the table leaned forward over to where I was sitting and said, "Oh, you actually do it in real life." I was dumbfounded. I was really dumbfounded. And I thought, why do we learn all this stuff? Is it just fun for the meeting and then we forget it? Yeah. And anyway, that's a bit of a tangent.
But I think it's something I'm very conscious of. And, whether you're in business or anything, because loads of people can fake it, but you watch these small little things. And then I think you see the true colors then.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. Yeah.
So you might give us, because obviously with Cyril, because like the fact that he got, just for those that wouldn't know, there's so many different competitions in Toastmasters. There's the humorous speech, there's the table topics, there's the evaluation, there's even the Polish one. He came first in, I believe, all of them. So he had, I don't know, was it 2 years ago or last year? He got to number one in the final of the 5 countries, and then you go forward and he didn't make it, or he got to the first. He went again. And that is determined. I wouldn't do that, to be honest with you. For me, it's like there's a lot of work and listening to the research. But you personally working with him, and obviously, I believe it's okay talking about, because he actually praised you on the show that I was when he came on.
Yeah. That was a very, very interesting journey, because if I meet somebody that says, "I have to win," my first question is why? What's going to happen if you don't? And very, very few people have this genuine quality of pleasure in winning. All of us, all of them, all of us, all of those people who go up and expose themselves to an audience, let's put it that way, everybody that goes on stage, I would say 90% of us have a small issue with somebody in our past, whether it's a teacher, a parent, or another relative, or whoever, who didn't quite recognize our value, and so we have to go and prove it in public. It might only be a very slight element, but it's always there. If, as well as that, there is the genuine joy of being in public and exposing yourself, then that can be a great talent. If the need to compensate for something in the past is too great, then the effort on stage makes it unpleasurable for the audience, because they can feel this need, and the audience begins to feel responsible for the well-being of the person on the stage. And that's reverse order. The person on stage is responsible for the room. And with Cyril, I came across somebody who already as a child had this feeling of performance. And he is a performer. This is part of his makeup. This is who he is. It's not the only thing that he is, but this is an absolutely important part. It's the essence of part of his character. And it was a joy working with him. The picking him up after the, I wouldn't even call it failure. I mean, it just happens that somebody else won. You know, it's like running a race as well. You might be generally faster than the other person, but if at that moment you're not faster, then they get to win. So it was basically a question of looking at the priorities in life in the long term. And there was a particular element of his wishing to win, which was, I don't think he would mind me saying, I hope he wouldn't mind me saying, it was pure ego. And I thought, well, you know, that's fine. Cyril, I don't care whether you win or lose. I think that's fine, but don't let this thing be so strong that you mess up your performance by trying too hard. And if you look at a number of the Toastmasters winning speeches back over the years, I find the quality extremely variable. I mean, there are some who you immediately relate to and you think, oh, I like this person. And that's half of winning. That's half of public speaking. Is there's got to be a likability quality there. If you don't like somebody, you're not going to relate to them in that way. So a lot of that was, what's the long term? And I have to say that I would like to say this, Cyril has given me one of the most amazing gifts in winning, but not in the winning as such, but in the interviews that he gave afterwards. And he visited our Toastmasters Club and said also what he would like to do in the future. And that is, he comes from Zimbabwe. And during one of the interviews, he said, I realized that I could only go on this journey because of the advantages that I had. I came from a family which was able to give me a good education and so on and so forth. And I realized that there's a whole generation, he said, of Zimbabwean children who don't have this opportunity. So now I want to give back. At some point, I want to go to Zimbabwe and teach these children and support them. And while he was speaking, I heard some of my ideas that we'd worked out together in his words. And I thought, isn't that amazing? I met Cyril online by chance. We started working. 2 years later, he's a winner. I hear some of my ideas out of his mouth, and they're going to Zimbabwe. So something that I did is going to affect indirectly, directly, indirectly, some kids in Zimbabwe. Normally, you don't get this feedback. And this was the great gift to hear it, but he didn't say it to me. And that's even a greater gift. He said it to somebody else. If he'd said it to me, okay, thank you, lovely, nice to hear it. And I feel a lot of people would be even happier if they were able to get this feedback from time to time, and usually it comes from a third party or a fourth or fifth party. But that was one of the greatest gifts ever. The work was very pleasurable because Cyril is an incredibly fast learner. And I learned one thing about him. Yeah, everybody has their favorite phrases. And his was, I can do that. And the first couple of times I heard him say it, I thought, oh, you say it so easily. Can you really do that? Are you sure? This is so, it sounds a bit slick. But I learned that he really can. If he says that, if Cyril says, I can do that, then I can trust him. And this learning to trust each other was something very important as well. We were occasionally in each other's faces. I mean, like that. Over 2 years, that's normal. It's a little bit like a family relationship. It's not the same, but there are similarities involved there. Yeah.
And I'm just curious, were you actually watching? Because I don't know, did they do it online as well, the final, or did you go to a big? Were you actually watching it? Did you see it?
You bet.
So was it nerve-wracking for you to be looking at this, because nobody knows who's going to win, because it can swing in anyways, like as you mentioned, the running. So yeah, it must have been nice to
we watched the semi-finals in my Toastmasters club, and we allowed everybody to be honorary judges. We gave everybody a judging ballot sheet, and they all, I think 90% of them chose Cyril as the winner from the semi-finals already. And I said, I'm not taking part in this because I'm totally biased. And it was interesting watching, because of course, as a coach, you always have that part of your brain working when you see people. You can't just switch it off. And I was watching the others, and I thought, oh, Cyril, well, you didn't do that bit, or you did do, oh, that's good. Oh, I don't remember that. I was commentating on it all in my brain. And the others that I saw were completely new to me. And so I was more generous in my appraisal of what they were doing, simply because it was new and I hadn't had time to sit and think, now, was that, could you have improved on anything, So I didn't actually consider him the winner in the semi-finals in my mind. I didn't tell anybody. I didn't tell him either. In the finals, it was quite clear. To me, it was quite clear. And there was something that happened between the semi-finals and the finals, which was something that I may have set it up with and for him, but I didn't do it. And it was a realization that he'd had minutes before going on stage. And as he went on stage for the first time, I thought, you're there. I can see you. I can feel you. I can trust you. It's done. I felt like it's done. He wasn't trying anything. He couldn't have been bigger in that moment. And I remember watching the speech and thinking, oh, I don't remember that. Is that a new line? Has he changed something? It turned out he hadn't changed much, but the way he delivered it was something I hadn't seen before. And that was extremely, that was gratifying to know that he didn't get there because I pushed him. He got there because he got there. And I was grateful to have been part of the journey, but it was his journey. And mine is a different one. My journey is the joy of pushing a little bit and finding out what goes on afterwards.
Oh, excellent. And because I know I've asked somebody before this, and with the Toastmasters, when you get into the semi-final and then get to the final, you have to do a different speech. Yeah. So are you bringing your A game to the table and then you have to do your B speech, or do you bring your B speech with the hope that you get by? And it's a hard one, isn't it? Because
yeah, it's a very hard one. I believe, I know that Cyril also wondered about that because he knew he could get laughs in his semi-final speech. Personally, this is my own personal view, and it may not be shared by anybody. I think every speech should be considered an A speech. It's got to be different to all the other ones. Every person, if you ask people to make a list of things they could talk about, I mean, I can talk about the joy of cooking whatever's left over in the fridge, because it's something I like doing. I can talk about sitting looking out of the window on a rainy day, all sorts of stuff that's not very important. But in everything that each person likes doing, or every experience that they've had, there's something in there which applies to everybody else as well. And so if you can find it, then that can be a fantastic speech. And then the next thing, totally unrelated, will also have that little thing which applies to everybody, and that can also be an A speech. And I think you have to treat every speech as the best one, which is not easy because, yeah.
Right.
I mean, I remember from gigging with the band, I know which song are you going to sing when. I'm keeping that song for the second half when people are warmed up, because that's a special song. Well, they're all special, but there's always one that you feel more attached to, or you feel speaks more from your own heart than some of the others. So it's difficult.
Excellent.
But a lot of it is strategy. And this is the part where I'm not good. I'm also not particularly good at structuring a speech from the beginning. I don't know whether you know Chris Fogler. He used to work in Hollywood, I think he still does, as a script doctor. I don't believe that's what he calls himself exactly, but he said he has a wonderful job. I went to a workshop of his once, and it was absolutely fascinating. He says, I get given the script that's already finished, and then it's my job to say, well, you know what, it would work better if you did that there and that there. And then everything works. And he always used to be called in towards the end of the process to make sure that things worked. And that's a bit of a luxury position, because you don't have the hard grind of setting the whole thing up, which I guess is why I like working with advanced people, because they've already done some of the hard grind. I also love working with beginners. You know, in Toastmasters, at least there's always the icebreaker, your very first speech ever in public. And I love working with people like that, you know, because some of them are so much better than they think. They always think they're terrible. And some of them are so enjoyable to watch and listen to. Yeah.
I think even like before, it used to be the book with 10 speeches, but just seeing somebody just trembling and you know they're terrified, and just going through that little journey that you go, wow, what a transition. It just feels so good to see somebody, because you get to know them. I mean, as you mentioned, you know, you might go for a beer afterwards, or have a bit of food or something like that, and you get to know them better. And you get close. That's what I love about Toastmasters. I've got some amazing friends that, like our club, you know, because I created my own club, a morning club. But when the lockdown thing happened, it just we didn't like the online stuff, so it just felt. But we're still meeting each other. We still got, you know, the odd time we'll meet up for breakfast and everything, and you get lifetime friendships from Toastmasters.
Yeah. Yes, indeed, you can do. Absolutely. Yeah.
So I know that with I've looked at your TEDx, which was, I believe in 2010. So
10, 11, yeah.
Yeah. And it's kind of different to how a lot of the TEDx ones, because a lot of the 10X ones are kind of, you know, they're just on the stage. They're not really interacting with the crowd. But your one was, you were interacting, and then you were playing a bit of, you know, piano. It was lovely, actually. But like, because you mentioned about how, say, the teachers can have an impact on people. And I've noticed that a lot of the speakers, when you ask them about their speaking, so many people have been terrified of speaking based on a teacher actually embarrassing them. And for me, music-wise, I was told that when I was 13, on the event, you just mime, and he said it to somebody else, like, don't sing. And you actually mentioned that in. And yeah, exactly. You know, for those listening, Naomi just put her hands to her face, because she realizes, and I know that's why being a teacher, being passionate, and it's a pity that they're not all like that they actually care to raise people up instead of pushing them down.
I am a peace-loving person, but that is a group of teachers that I would throttle with my own hands. Not because they're wrong, which they are, because everyone can learn to sing, but because it's an absolute crime to discourage a child in their efforts to be creative at that age. And they ostracize them from the group. They don't realize it, maybe. But I do remember very clearly, I used to give this workshop called Everyone Can Sing. I work in Germany, so it was Singen kann jeder. And it was astounding how damaged people felt. They felt they'd been damaged there was something wrong with them. There was something unclean about them. And I do remember, I also said this in the TED talk or TEDx talk. There was one guy that came in, and men tend to be less emotional when they give their feedback or when they talk about themselves. And he said, when I was told, when the others sing, you just move your mouth, he said, it felt like a small death sentence. I thought, oh, how can you do that to children? And I remember being a school teacher and in the staff room, listening to some of the conversations and thinking, I think these people have become teachers in order to take revenge on the next generation of children for the things that they had to suffer in their childhood. And this kind of passing stuff on, I can't say it makes me, well, it does make me angry. What makes me angriest is that so few people are willing or able to question themselves about their motives. Why am I doing this? Why am I being so horrible to these children? They've done nothing to me. They're trying their best. And if you want to become a teacher, I think this is one of the questions you have to ask yourself. Why do I need to teach others? Is it because it gives me power? Because it does give you power. How do I use this power and why? And of course, I have met some wonderful teachers in my life. I've been grateful. My English teacher at school, I have two icons in my life. The one is the cleaning lady, and the other one is my English teacher at school, she taught us to think. And not just to, grammar and what's right and what's wrong and discuss a book. We had to think. We had to question stuff. We had to question our own stuff as well. Tell me why you think that. And you'd have to justify why you thought something. And she would never laugh at us. Because there was always this, when a person is trying to find their way, this is the moment to encourage them and not to laugh at them. And a teacher that laughs at children, they should be sacked. They should do something else.
And that's the thing that I dislike, is it's normally a job for life.
Yeah.
And I mean, like my mom, we had about 3 schools that were near where we were living, but she brought us to the so-called best school in the city, which was 40-minute walk. We didn't have a car, so it was either bus or walking there.
Right.
And we had like alcoholic teachers. There was one guy, he was a sports guy. He'd just come in, he'd open the book, read that and walk out. Or I even caught him where a guy was giving the same results for the Christmas test to the summer test. Of course, it was all hushed out. I kind of knew, the way you do way better. And I got the same result. And I started checking around, and yeah, it was kind of quashed. I've also had, when I was 13 as well, a teacher, for some reason, they used to go around the class for the history and make you stand up. And just in an aggressive way. And I used to stutter and I used to stumble and everything. And it wasn't that I wasn't trying. My mother never said anything to me about studying and everything. I used to be reading this history. And I came last in the class. I got 18%. And in front of everybody, he said, my grandmother would do better and she's been dead 10 years.
Wow.
And exactly. And I think maybe it was because of him that I did. I was in my mid-40s when I started going to Toastmasters and getting noticed. But 3 years later, I got a different teacher. I was getting 100% constantly coming first in the class. A different teacher that was just so nice. And in the state exam, I got an A, the highest you can get. Yeah. And to be, say, the worst and just abused and shot. And that happens with everybody. Everyone has that story. That's the sad thing. That's not an isolated incident. Every time you talk to somebody, yeah, this teacher done this to me. And
Yeah.
And it's getting worse because I like with the other podcasts, we're exposing fraud and corruption, and we've had people that are kind of looking at the education system, and they're basically pushing out the decent teachers.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I was very, very lucky in school. I can't remember a single, I remember teachers that I didn't like or I thought was silly, but I can't remember ever having been put down by a teacher, except for my English teacher. But I mean, the way she did it, this is just who she was. Latin, I changed schools, and the school I came to was at least a year ahead in Latin. There was no way I was going to catch up because I didn't like the subject anyway. And so I started doing what I never normally did, was sort of scribbling on the desk and passing notes and stuff, you know. And I'll never forget what she said. She said, Naomi, and she had this rather very English voice and way of speaking. Naomi, I think it would be to your advantage and to the advantage of the rest of the class if during Latin lessons you should prefer to do something else. And I've never been thrown out of class in such a beautiful, I know I've been thrown out of class, but that was so great. And I learned the subjunctive, if you should prefer to, you know. But it was so gentle, everybody laughed. And I did do something else during Latin lessons. It was quite clear that I was wasting my time in Latin lessons and theirs because I was disturbing. And I loved that school because it was a school where the pupils were taken seriously. If it was quite clear that you had no talent in that direction and it wasn't going to be useful to you, you were allowed to not do it. You could go and do something else. You could go and study or go to another subject. We had a certain amount of freedom in choice of subjects, which was absolutely great. I was very, very lucky in my school years. The first school I went to was a grammar school. They were very strict and incredibly academic, and I'm non-academic. It just doesn't work for me. I'm chaotic right-brainer. So I was glad to go to the other school. I was very, very lucky with my teachers.
I know, because I've read a book, I don't know, is it called Summerhill or something, Austin O'Neill or O'Neill, and basically they weren't pushing. It's kind of like the Finnish system now. And everybody was kind of objecting to it, and he was getting way better results. Like all the tyrants were coming in, and within 6 months, they all wanted to learn because they weren't being pushed. And then other schools were coming in to try to see could they replicate it. But obviously, that kind of system's being quashed. But it just shows for the creativity. Like with my son here, it's kind of copying the Finnish system. They've got a piano on the thing, they've got a ping pong table. They all go, and you just see the happiness. You don't see the same kind of. When I grew up, you just see, the way, that kids are just kind of trotting through. They don't want to be there. But there's like, my son loves being there, and that's the way it should be. You're going there and you're learning something, but it's not rammed down your throat.
Right. I think it's gradually getting better, also internationally. And I'm so grateful for that because it does hurt me to see how many unhappy people there are around. Some people just come here for coffee and a chat. And then you get the conversation, well, actually, what I always wanted to do was something else. And I think, oh my goodness, and you're sitting in an office and you're absolutely miserable and you're not going to leave until you're 65. And what you wanted to do was singing or sports or write books or something completely different. And it's not so easy to start when you're 65. I mean, some people do. Some people start up a new business at the age of 80, but it's just not so easy. And it's not so easy to be taken seriously at that age, I've noticed. There's some people that came to me to learn singing when they were in their mid to late 40s, sort of, do you think it would be okay? And you will tell me if I shouldn't sing, won't you? And I said, no, I won't tell you that. I will never, ever tell anybody they shouldn't. If they say, should I make it my profession? That's different. Then I'll explain how the profession really works. You spend about 3% of your time singing and the rest is organization and looking for the next gig. It's not all singing. But if they say, should I sing? Yes, of course you should sing. Even if you can't, then you should sing even more. Because there isn't a book that says you are of more value when you sing. There are no books that say what's right and what's wrong academically, or the subjects that you should or shouldn't do. There are books that say you should develop your talents. There are books that say you should honor your father and mother, and so on and so forth. But the content, there are no books. It's choice. Yeah. Society only demands really two things of you. First of all, that you pay your bills or get someone to pay them. That's important. And secondly, that you don't hurt anyone or harm them too badly. Now, we all hurt people from time to time, but we try not to, or I hope we try not to. But the rest is all free will. You can choose, but you are discouraged from choosing. And that, I believe, is the closest I would get to calling something a sin. But I also don't believe in sin in that sense, but it's so destructive.
I think just from studying through this, it looks at a lot of the schooling system based on a memory system as opposed to your skill set, gets you into the corporate environment, which makes you put in a job. And the sad thing is, the amount of people who don't release their dreams, who just stick through it and thread through it, they have no hobbies, right? And a lot of them within 3 months of retiring actually pass on because they have no meaning to live. So the first thing you should do is, what do I love? Did I like I started recently painting again because myself, I was 13. They kicked it out of the schooling system, obviously, because they don't want us to be creative. And I was very good then. And I didn't paint till recently. And I'm painting, and I'm like, I'm enjoying this. And people are coming in, seeing my, and they don't realize I've painted it. They go, that's beautiful. And I'm going, and it's like, everyone should do that. Everyone should take up an instrument. They should just be free, be a child, be the inner child and release ourselves.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, how wonderful. Congratulations on taking that painting again. That's great. Have you got a painting there that you can hold
No,
up?
they're all downstairs, but I'll actually send you the pictures. I'll send you.
Oh, yes, please do. I'd love to see them. Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. Yes, hobbies are underrated. The word is actually dying out. Have you noticed? We don't use the word anymore. So do you have other interests?
Yeah, that was like before, when you were, it was always the case. What hobbies have you got? I mean, whether it's collecting stamps or something, but people had different things. And now, you don't hear it anymore.
You don't. It's weird. I wonder why that is. I never really thought about why. Is it because people don't have hobbies, or is it because we're using different vocabulary to describe other interests outside of our professional life? Because I know people that do an extraordinary number of things apart from working wherever it is that they work. Writing and hiking and drawing and painting and making music and Toastmasters and all. Yeah, it's interesting. I wonder if it's just a vocabulary shift, or whether it's a shift of evaluation of how did we take hobbies seriously? Did we need another word to say it's an interest? It's not just a hobby, it's something, I don't know. Philosophizing. No idea.
Excellent. Naomi, thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. And I know I didn't get through half the questions that I want, so I will definitely love to get you back. But you might let people know, how can they get in contact with you?
I think the easiest way is my website, which is charismology.com, originally from the word charisma with CH, charismology.com, or on Facebook. I'm on Facebook. I think I'm most recognizable by my photo, because I'm not the only Naomi Isaacs there. I think I'm the only Naomi Susan Isaacs there. Or Google. Yeah. They can write to Naomi@charismology.com.
Okay, thanks. I'll make sure I put all the links for the Facebook and the website on both the audio and the video. Thank you very much. And definitely we'll come back. We'll talk about the charisma the next time. Definitely have to come back on the show because I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation.
I would absolutely love to, Roy. I've enjoyed talking to you so much, enjoyed getting to know you for the first time personally, and look forward to everything else that I hear from you.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. So that's all for the Speaking Podcast. You'll find all our episodes on speakingpodcast.com. As mentioned, we're on BitChute and YouTube. And also, because I'm playing around with it, if you're on Spotify or if you're not, this will go up in the video format as well. So you'll be able to actually see the conversation as well as listening to it. All about me and my podcasting coaching can be found on bio.link/podcaster. Until next week, take care.